Hi and welcome to another video about Ableton Push Standalone. When I got Ableton Push Standalone a year ago, I quickly realized there are some quirks in the workflow. It only has 8 encoders that can do everything from mixing to editing notes, controlling device parameters and more, but only one thing at a time. So I found myself jumping between screens and encoder functions to adjust this constantly. After some time I thought it'd be great to have more control than Push can offer, especially in a live situation. Ideally, I'd like to have the mixer plus some device control always available without jumping between Push screens. This shouldn't be a problem since Standalone supports MIDI controllers, so I started experimenting with those I had laying around, namely my Faderport EC4 and the Behringer X-Touch Mini. Only to find out that besides Standalone not having an option to map the MIDI parameters on itself, also has a bit of a problem. No auto mapping and no user remote scripts. This means that if you want to map parameters to a MIDI controller, you have to manually map it on a computer, then transfer the mapped out project to Push, select the MIDI controller and Push MIDI settings, and off you go. But when you start another project, you have to do that again and again and again. You could save your mappings to a template project or template device and reuse those to save some time, but it's very limited. Luckily, Ableton uses the remote control scripts, either built in or built by user/manufacturer, that allow for deeper control and auto mapping of parameters. That's the red box moving in Ableton. Push itself uses remote scripts when in controller mode, so does Akai APC and a bunch of others. And since Push is running Ableton live and standalone, it should work just the same, right? Well, since user remote scripts are still a no-go on standalone after a year, no third-party controllers like the X-Touch or Faderport work, and it's hit and miss with the built-in scripts. The EC4 has a dedicated Ableton Live mode where it controls volume, pen, device and all that for first 16 tracks. But when I connect it to Push Standalone, it is detected in the MIDI settings. I can also set it to remote, but the controls that should control volume of the first 16 tracks in this case just do nothing. And I uploaded the custom Faderport user script to Push, but it just gets ignored. So basically we're stuck with the built-in native scripts included in Ableton. There's a ton of great controllers out there, but all of them require custom scripts and usually use the Mackie control protocol for things like moving between tracks and scenes or devices. Part of the problem is that on Push there's no MIDI port mapping. This screen here just doesn't exist on standalone. And yes, I tried setting it up on computer and transferring the project to Push. It's a no-go. So I started going through the native list, checking out various controllers, features and availability. Most of the items in the list are no longer in production, which is fine since I was primarily planning on building used gear anyway. So first I set my priorities. I definitely want 8 plus faders plus some knobs. I don't need any grid launch buttons, I'm fine with using Push for this. Oh, and it'd be great to have either LED rings for knobs or motorized faders or displays, so I can see the set values directly. Basically something like the Faderport EC4 here, just with faders. So that leaves us with only few choices that are reasonably priced, equipped, available and even somewhat portable. Some of those are known to work out of the box with Push Standalone, anything from Akai or Novation basically. Others are unknown. There's a list of working controllers over on the Ableton user forums, but there's only APC40 and Launch Control XL confirmed on that list, plus of course the launch pads, but those don't have faders. So Novation Launch Control XL, this would be my first choice, and I almost bought it a few months ago because it has faders and some knobs. It reportedly works when standalone, is reasonably portable, and at around 150 euros it's a good bang for buck. But no endless encoders, and the default mapping is somewhat limited for my taste. It can be customized, but the custom mappings are not reflected in the native scripts, as far as I can tell from reading the manuals. The Akai APC 2040, 40MK2 Mini, the APC 64, they all are proven to work, but are pretty big and I'm mostly focused on grid launching, a bunch of unnecessary buttons for my scenario. Also, they cost around 300 euros even used, and I couldn't find any good offers in local classifieds or on Reverb eBay at the moment, so runner-up, but pass for now. Novation Remote SL. It's pretty outdated. It has nice features though. It has faders and displays and all that. So I got the Zero SL MK2 version for cheap locally. I tried it with standalone and nope, didn't work at all. Part of the problem with remote scripts, even the native ones, is that some are auto-detected by Ableton, and those should work fine with standalone. But some need to be told which ports to use, like the Zero SL, which reports 2 MIDI ports to OS, and again this part of Ableton doesn't exist on Push. Akai Midi Mix, this one is small and portable and should work, but it's pretty cheap and the build quality is not great, hard pass. Behringer BCF 2000. This is pretty old, but has motorized faders and endless encoders, and can be found for around 100 euros used, and looks like it would tick most of the boxes for me. But reportedly it has issues running with newer Mac OS, has an actual 240 volt power socket, so no chance of running it off of a power bank for portability, and reportedly is pretty noisy. Presonus Faderport. I was checking this one out, and although it's primarily designed for Studio One, the integration with Ableton looks solid. It's pretty big and heavy, and a bunch of buttons are unused in Ableton mode, but it has motorized faders, it has displays that show parameter values, and is still being sold as new and is fully supported by Presonus. It's also around 500 euros, so sort of out of my budget for what it does, but as you probably guessed, this is what I got here today. I got it for less than half the price of the new unit on local classifieds, so it was an impulse buy. The plan being connect it to Push Standalone, find out it's not working, sell it the next day, and keep waiting for the user scripts to come to Push so I can start using the fader Fox or whatever. So I was pretty amazed when I connected it to Push. The faders started to jump around. So let's look at the features and check out how it works with Push Standalone. There's a full review from Loopop where he went over the Ableton integration with the Faderport pretty extensively. So for reference, head over to check it out. The link is in the description. Let's do a little rundown of all the functions and let's see what works and what doesn't. The motorized faders are the centerpiece here and they jump up and down as they're supposed to do. So you can see the set values right away. So no jumps in values as in normal potentiometers and no need to wiggle the faders to catch up or pick up modes. The faders can control a number of things. Volume in track mode. Also works the other way around. Although there's a bit of a lag when changing the next one is Sense. For the selected track I have only one send here. For the drum bass, Pans, which sets the faders in the middle for center, and then you can move left and right. And of course it works the other way around. You can set because of the pan, also with the pan/parameter knob, with just selecting the track, and a click on the encoder resets it to center. Then we have the edit plugins, which controls the devices. First we have to select a track that has some devices on. I think this one does. No. Okay, let's go here. So we just select the track, hit edit plugins, and then we can choose from the devices that are on that channel. So this is the auto filter. Let's check it out. And also the displays show us the parameter values for the given device. So this, for example, is the drum bus, and there's a filter on there. Ah, yeah, it's controlled by something else. It's controlled by this one. To go back to the device selection, you just hit edit plugins again. And since I selected the control here, this is a sort of macro control for my project here, I have access to these parameters. Jump back, select that. Well, there's no other device on here, but when we get to another track, like this, you should be able to see, yeah, either the kit, which doesn't have any macros defined, or go back, the glue compressor. We can adjust that. Okay, so that's the faders. Let's go through the buttons from left to right. I made little stickers with Ableton functions, printed on them, because some of the buttons do different things than what's actually printed on them. Those without stickers work more or less according to their labels. So arm switches the select buttons to arm when we are in track mode. So I can arm whatever tracks I can. I have it set to exclusive arm on the push, so I can't select more than one, or shift arm should select all, but it's set to exclusive arm on here. Solo and mute are it does what it says it does, and we have solo clear and mute clear that clears all the solos and mutes. So these buttons basically do what they're supposed to do. Bypass switches to return tracks. I only have one send return here set up, so I have the go to the mixer. I should be able to see that in here. Yeah, that's my send. And I can adjust the return track with return tracks. Macro and link buttons are unused in either Ableton and Push Standalone. Let's go through these. Well, track, edit plugins, sends and pans. We talked about these are fader modes. Shift track, show us the time code. So I'm gonna play that. It's pretty useful, I guess. Then ledge does nothing. Trim and off are actually undo and redo, written as a shift functions down here. Touch does nothing on the Push Standalone, but in on a computer, in Ableton on a computer, it should toggle the back to arrangement button. Same with draw mode. Draw mode only works on a computer, does nothing on Push. And follow timeline is again the only working on a computer. The audio button switches between arranger and session view. On a computer does obviously nothing on the Push because there's no arranger view. Clip device view switches between clip and device view on a computer. Again, nothing on Push. Browser opens the browser on a computer. Again, nothing on Push. And detail view switches on and off the detail view on a computer. Again, no use on Push. The all button is unused. Transport controls, I'll just quickly jump down to transport controls. Play from the beginning of a clip. In our case, stop is stop, recording is, well, recording. Loop does basically nothing on Push, but it switches to loop point in arrangement view. It switches to loop on in Ableton computer, and these two sort of move between and these two sort of move within a clip. I guess it's more useful on a computer anyway. Now the encoder and these buttons have multiple functions as well. Channel jumps between tracks. You can either use left, right, or mute clear, or the encoder. Bank does that in banks of 8. Again, same with the encoder. And master adjusts the main volume. Punch in and punch out do nothing on Push, but they work as punch in and punch out on in a computer. Marker sets with the push of the encoder, it sets a marker in the arrangement, and then rotating the encoder or pushing left, right, you can jump between markers. Obviously does nothing on Push because there's no markers or arrangement view. And that leaves us with Zoom and scroll. Zoom and scroll have two different functions on a computer. Zoom in arrangement view on a computer zooms the timeline in, out. You can jump. Scroll scrolls the timeline in arrangement view. But when in session view, and this works the same on both Push and Ableton on the computer. Well, the weird thing is, we can just turn off all these. The Ranger/Session button does nothing on Push because there's no arrangement view, but what it does is it switches the function of the zoom and scroll buttons. So, as I said before, zoom and scroll work just as they're supposed to do in arrangement view, but when we switch to session view, these buttons change function to grid navigation. So these buttons change function to grid navigation, like this. You can scroll between clips and up and down. And then what Zoom does is it launches the selected clip. Let's say this one. And the scroll button just launches the whole scene. One more pretty useful feature that works from time to time is when you hit Shift and encoder, the displays show volume meters for all the all the tracks. You can turn it off with Shift and click on the encoder. I had this fail on me a couple of times. I don't know if this was a hiccup or I mean the rest of the machine was working just fine, but the view meters just didn't show anything, and I had to reboot the Faderport for it to work again. So let's talk about some pros and cons. On the pro side, the motorized faders are super useful and also look cool. Displays ease up the navigation, and most of the buttons have useful functions. On the con side, it's pretty big, so if space is limited, this might be an issue for some. I'd like to see something much smaller like the Icon P1, M or X working with standalone, but until we get user remote scripts on Push, this is one of the very few options. There's some lag when changing the parameters on Push. It takes a second for the faders to follow. Other way around, directions are just fine. Not sure if my particular Faderport or general issue, but most of the buttons don't react very well when pushed lightly. I have to slam them pretty hard. I tried cleaning them, but no change. But then again, the machine is several years old, so might be just wear and tear. The mute and solo buttons are tiny, so hitting the right one can be a challenge, especially in live situation. And the unused buttons and some of the not so useful buttons take a lot of unnecessary space. But I get it that we're bending the machine here into something it wasn't designed for in the first place. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it complements the Push nicely, and until we get the user scripts, which will open the game for any controller on the market basically, it's pretty cool. Thanks for watching and see you next time.